Hello everyone, welcome back. If you have not been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books. Today I have an audiobook for you. This one is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Oh, the journey I went on listening to this book. And it's a full-on production, by the way. This isn't just like a one person reads the book. This is like a full cast. It's read by Nicola Walker and Louise Brealey, and I'll admit, listening to Nicola Walker, I think it's just because of how good she is in Last Tango in Halifax, that I completely forgot that she's not actually from Yorkshire, and it was just like, is that Nicola Walker? Because my brain thinks that she's from Yorkshire. My brain thinks that she's from Halifax. Even though she's not. She was born and grew up in like London. But yeah, so my brain wasn't connecting the fact that it was actually Nicola Walker. And then Louise Brealey, she was in Sherlock. I think that's probably the main place where I recognise Louise Brealey from. But yeah, it says that she played Molly in Sherlock. She also played a student nurse called Roxanne Bird in Casualty. I don't really watch Casualty. Yeah, she's done quite a lot, but I think a lot of people do know her from Sherlock. And having the images of those two actresses in my head as I was reading it, it felt like it just all helps to click into place when you've got that, the right person and the right voice. But then you've also got like all the music and things, and you've got little cameos from other people in there as well, and we've got like short chapters. I just have to read the blurb and then I can properly go into this. Okay. Celebrating her 45th birthday at her local pub, podcaster Alex Summers crosses paths with an unassuming woman called Josie Fair. Josie is also celebrating her 45th birthday. They are, in fact, birthday twins. A few days later, Alex and Josie bump into each other again, this time outside Alex's children's school. Josie has been listening to Alex's podcast and thinks she might be an interesting subject for a new series. She tells Alex, on the cusp of great changes in her life. Alex agrees to a trial interview. Josie's life appears to be strange and complicated, and although Alex finds her unsettling, she can't quite resist the temptation to keep digging. Slowly, Alex starts to realise that Josie has been hiding some very dark secrets, and before she knows it, Josie has revealed her way into Alex's life and into her home. Soon she begins to wonder, who is Josie Fair and what has she done? It's in crime and thriller, mystery, psychological fiction. A lot of it feels like you are listening to the podcast, but there are sections where you're seeing the individual points of view of both Alex and Josie. It's in the third person. At the beginning of the book, you've got Alex and Josie. They happen to be in the same pub at the same time. They realise they both have the same birthday. Josie approaches Alex and says, "Oh, I'm your birthday twin because we're both celebrating our 45th birthdays on the same day." And then they find out they were born in the same hospital on the same day, in the same year. And so it all leads into the podcast that Josie then presents to Alex, because we find out that Alex is a podcaster and she interviews women who have changed their lives. And so they're very simple podcasts, with the idea it's just like a sit-down interview. And Josie, she basically goes to Alex after meeting her at the pub on their birthday. She then, I can't remember why she drops by the school, but it was Josie's daughters went to the school, and then Alex's younger children go to the school now. And so when they meet each other, Josie goes up to Alex and says, "I realise I recognise your name. I went and listened to a couple of your podcasts, and to be honest, I have an idea for a podcast, and would you be willing to hear me out?" And even though Alex's podcasts, as they are just typical interviews, Josie's idea for a podcast is, you already interview people who have already changed their lives. What would you think about doing a podcast about somebody who is about to change their life? And Alex gets intrigued by that, and so they sit down for an initial, almost like a pilot episode, to see what's going on, and for Alex to figure out if this is something that she might be interested in taking further. And so she finds out about how Josie met her husband, and I will say there are talks of an abusive relationship and predator behaviour, because there is a very big age difference between Josie and her husband, because you find out that Josie met her husband for the first time when she was about 13, and they got together when she was 16, and he was in his early 40s. So Alex is like sat on tenterhooks going, oh my god, were you groomed? And there's a lot of interesting thoughts about that relationship and how some people talk about that relationship, kind of putting in the idea of people's heads that Josie was in control more than you thought she was. And it was just like, you're still looking at a man that chose to enter a relationship with a 16-year-old, and so I don't think you can completely ignore that, no matter how in control you think Josie was or was not of that situation. So yeah, I will just warn you about that aspect, because there is a bit of victim blaming, but towards Josie, not just like the idea in general, but in regards to the specific relationship between Josie and her husband, and what she may or may not think about what is happening in her own home. The title of it is almost misleading in a way, because you go in wondering what on earth to believe. I mentioned in a little post that I put on my Instagram yesterday, I think, when I finished this book, that the title in itself is a bit of an unreliable narrator and red herring in one, because as soon as you go in, because it's called None of This Is True, and because you are essentially listening to parts of the podcast throughout the book as an audiobook, I found myself constantly wondering who I should be believing, and trying to work out like who was in denial, who wasn't, but then my brain kept emphasising on the none of this is true of the title. And I think that had the name of the book been the name of the podcast, which is Hello, I Am Your Birthday Twin, the idea of that being the title of the book may have put me in a different headspace while I was reading it, because I wouldn't have been going in thinking none of this is true. It would just be Hello, I Am Your Birthday Twin, which is how they meet and what the name of the podcast is, while Alex figures out what Josie's story is in regards to how she's about to change her life. Because Josie talks about how she met her husband, how that happened, her children, her now adult children, but then also you've got the other side of it where you see Alex's relationship with her husband and the possible denial that Alex is in over her husband and her husband's alcoholism, and how that is affecting their relationship. So it's like Josie is seeing parallels that may or may not be there. Josie is at this point trying to own her history and trying to move forward from it, but at the same time is also holding Alex up on a pedestal a little bit and comparing their lives when maybe she shouldn't be comparing, because they are in very different places. Alex and her husband do not have the age gap that Josie and her husband have. They both had kids at different times. They may both have 2 kids, but they had them at very different times. Josie was like 22 when she had her first daughter, and so her kids are all grown up. And Alex met her husband when she was in her late 30s and had her first child when she was about 41. So yeah, you've got 2 people who were born on the same date in the same hospital, but have very different lives, different backstories, different relationships, and so it is kind of a nature versus nurture type thing as well, especially when you meet Josie's mother and you see Josie's mother's narcissism and how Josie's mother, I think it's Pat, Pat, because when Alex interviews Pat, the mum, for the podcast, Pat just keeps going on and on about how the fact that she was at uni when she got pregnant and how she was admittedly not a great mum and how she didn't want Josie and how Josie just seemed to get in the way and how independent she wanted her to be and stuff. And you like, Josie is a person who was grown from the circumstances that she was put in. She was born to a mother who obviously didn't want her. Her father was not in her life. Her mother doesn't even remember what Josie's father's name was. And so Pat sees Josie as just something that got in the way. It's a bit eye-opening into how Josie became the person that she is, but then her mother's narcissism also affects the way you see the relationship between Josie and her husband. It's so layered and complex, and as I said, the title of it just really, it meant that from the very first words of the book I was trying to figure out whose side I was on, almost, and trying to defend both of them and figure out what went wrong and what went right, and it was just so good. And this audiobook is a full production, so you do have like a male voice coming in every so often. So this is taken from Alex's podcast on this date, and then you have the two actresses together doing either side of it, either side of the conversation on that podcast, and then you have interviews with people who came across people. You're just like, this, I am the person who Josie gave her dog to, or whatever. And yeah, so it's a full production, and then you also have the music in between sections. So yeah, it's just a full-on production, and I was living for it. It was just like every single time I had to put the book down, I was just like, I want to see what happens. I want to hear what happens. And then when you do get to the end, and I was just like, I knew it was coming, we were going to get a point of view from somebody to explain things, and you get that other twist, and you see kind of almost the defending and not defending of things that Josie and Alex did throughout the book, and it's riveting, it's edge of your seat stuff. I couldn't put it down. I enjoyed this so much, and I want to read it again. I want to listen to it again. I want to read the physical book, and because of how it's done with what is essentially a full cast, because even though it says on here it's read by Nicola and Louise, it did say at the beginning the names of the other people involved who I can't remember for the life of me now. Can you hear it on the preview? I'm not sure. You hear the music, it's awesome. Interspersed throughout the reading of the book.
None of this is true. By Lisa Jewell. Read by Nicola Walker and Louise Brealey. Featuring performances from Jenny Walser, Aisha Antoine, Elliot Fitzpatrick, Tom Judd, Kristen Atherton, Dominic Thorburn, Alex Dunmore, and Lisa Jewell.
Yeah. All of those people also feature in those other chapters in regards to the guy who introduces the podcast, police officers, the people interviewed by the police. Pretty much at the beginning of the book, once all like the podcast stuff starts happening, you become aware of how deadly this is going to get. You also don't know who or what or why. And so you go through the book kind of knowing that something is about to happen, but you don't know who it's going to affect. And you've also got that idea planted in your mind of none of this is true, and you're just there going, can I trust anything coming out of either of the main characters' mouths? In regard to the podcast, what is true and what isn't? And actually a theory that I theorised on as I was listening to it was actually commented on at the very end of the book by I say eavesdropper, somebody else is eavesdropping on a conversation about this in regards to, were they in on it? I just say that. Because that was a theory of mine going through, hearing the words, none of this is true. And, yeah. If I could do anything different about this, it's just the title. I do wonder if having the title of the book being Hello, I Am Your Birthday Twin, which is the name of the podcast that they come up with because it was the first words that Josie said to Alex, I wonder if that would have put me in a slightly different headspace in regards to listening and reading to the audiobook, because I didn't have those words stuck in my head every single time somebody spoke or shared part of their story. None of this is true. Even the title is misleading, considering where it ends up. The tagline is, her lies could kill you. Just gonna say that. Yeah, it was so good. It was so good. I was listening to it on my walks at work, the audiobook, and every single time I got to the end of my lunch break and I realised I had to go back to work and I couldn't continue listening to it, I was just there going, maybe just one more minute, one more chapter, and it was just like, no Debs, because otherwise you won't be working. That's the front cover of the audiobook. Just obsessed, completely obsessed. because I've done The Family Remains and The Family Upstairs, and then None of This Is True. The next available one to me will be Invisible Girl. So let's reserve Invisible Girl, because that sounds interesting. I think we found somebody else, author-wise, that I'm really liking. Yeah. So yeah, I've just reserved Invisible Girl. Other books on here. The Night She Disappeared. That sounds like an interesting one. Then She Was Gone. I Found You. And The Girls. I'm intrigued. You just watch me reserve books on my library app now. I do read on BorrowBox, which is an app that connects to local libraries across the UK, I believe. For me, this is Leeds Libraries, because I live in West Yorkshire. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. We just recently hit 250 subscribers, so thank you very much for the follows, everybody. And I hope you're enjoying, whether you are here for the books or for the shorts and the sketches. I hope you enjoy. But yeah, take care. I love you all, and I'll see you on Sunday. Stay safe, everybody. I love you all.